It's going great, great. Thanks for doing this.
Listen, anybody who played for Butch, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, but Butch is Bob McKeag. Bob McKeag was one of Coach Parkhill's teammates at UVA, and he coached at Robinson in Fairfax, coached me in Fairfax, and he was a great coach, one of the funniest guys I met, and he really introduced me to a lot of your UVA friends like Andrew Benini, who I played a lot of ball with, and Bobby Stokes. Coach McKeag got me in with those guys when I went to UVA, which was really helpful to me.
Great. I don't call him Butch anymore. I call him Bob.
Okay. Yeah. I guess when you get old, Butch is kind of a tough nickname. But I just want to give broad sketches of your career for folks who haven't been following basketball very long. Barry Parkhill, based from State College, Pennsylvania, basically put UVA on the map. The first big time player we ever had. You led UVA to some big upsets, a top 10 ranking. You and Wally Walker really started the UVA basketball into being a top 20 perennial program. And then you were a first round draft choice of the Portland Trailblazers. You've been you coached like your brother Bruce, coach at William & Mary. And for the last 30 years or so, you've been in fundraising for UVA. So when I look back at your career, you have spent most of your time at college towns, which has got to be an amazing place to live.
You're correct, Julian. State College, Pennsylvania was a great place to grow up. Of course, a college town. Charlottesville, same thing. My wife and I lived in Williamsburg, Virginia for 11 years. We lived in Burlington, Vermont for 1 year, which was the coldest year I've ever spent, but a college town, and spent 2 years at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, which is a wonderful area. So we've been very blessed with living in really good places, but Charlottesville, it's it for me and my wife, and it's a great place.
It sure is. Well, why don't we go back to State College? I know your father played for Penn State as well, and I know you were born in Philadelphia, but I guess you probably grew up mostly in State College.
I was born in Philly. My father did go to Penn State, played basketball there, and he went back to Philadelphia. He was in food service and met my mom. My mom's father was professor of psychology at Penn State. But we moved back to State College. I was going into my second grade year, and my dad got a job. He was in food service and ran a dining hall at Penn State. So from second grade through high school, growing up in State College.
So how did you get started in basketball? I know, your father played, obviously your older brother played, but it had to be a football environment. I knew Rip Engel had turned around the Penn State program, and then right when you got into high school, I think Joe Paterno first was hired, and Penn State just became a national program. So was it all football all the time, or did you have a big basketball culture at Penn State and State College?
Well, I was exposed to basketball through my dad. I started playing in fifth grade. Quite honestly, just fell in love with it. Central Pennsylvania is football and wrestling.
Wrestling, yeah.
And I always say I played in the worst high school basketball league in the country. I shouldn't say the worst. It was not real competitive. And when we got into the playoffs, we always had really good years, but we got into playoffs and played teams that were much better than our competition, we struggled. The one advantage I had, Julian, in growing up in State College is I could initially sneak into Penn State's gym when I was grade school, all the way through high school. And early on, you'd play against college kids. Then when I got better, I'd play against and with Penn State players. And in order to get better, you got to work at your game, but playing against better competition, that's what gets you better. Plus, I had an older brother who kicked my butt just about every day in our backyard. So that was really to my advantage. Didn't even know it at the time.
Well, but one thing about college towns is you usually have great teachers at the public schools, and you usually have great coaches because you're at a place where they have access to top academic institutions and stuff. So who was your high school coach, and what did you learn from him?
My high school coach was a gentleman named Ted Kemmerer. He has since passed away. I would probably say I learned a lot of fundamentals through my dad. And I went to a couple basketball camps, Julian. One when I was, I think, in 8th grade in the Poconos. I don't remember much about it other than most of the Syracuse players were there, including Dave Bing, who was a great player.
DC legend.
But then Jerry West was always my idol, and I feel very grateful. I consider Jerry a very special friend. I've known Jerry for 50 years.
Well, that's awesome.
But I went to a camp at Juniata College before my junior and senior year in high school for 2 weeks each summer, and Pete Maravich was the headliner. And I learned a whole lot from Pete. And it was an amazing experience. But a lot of it was just playing, Julian. Just I was obsessed with playing, and I wish I had back then what kids have now with strength training, weight training, and coaching on a more regular basis. But just I was obsessed with playing.
What I think Juniata College, isn't that where Chuck Knox went to college?
Oh, I think so, Julian.
Yeah.
Juniata College is about 35 miles from State College. It's a really fine Division III program, liberal arts school.
Yeah.
But that's where I went to this camp.
Yeah, I only know that because I did a podcast with a guy named Andy Heck. I don't know if you know Andy. Andy was actually graduate assistant at UVA. So he's a offensive line coach for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I played against him. He played at Woodson with Tommy Amaker. And he just happened to tell me that Chuck Knox went to school there. And I didn't even know, I had never heard of it. So I looked it up after I talked to him. But
I think I did meet Andy. He was on our football staff here for a brief period of time.
Yeah.
And another guy, this is totally out of the blue. I don't know if you know Wendell Bird.
Of course I know Wendell Bird. He's a coaching legend up here. Coach Grant Hill and Joey Beard
Yep. Wendell Bird was in some kind of a program in State College when I think I was either my first or second year. I was back home or into my high school years, and we used to play quite a bit in State College. That's back 50 plus years.
Yeah, it's funny that Wendell Bird got there. He lived in Falls Church, which is near where I am now. And Falls Church was a small community that didn't play the other big, large schools around them. So they'd travel all the way like to Luray and play games. And he was like, him and his brother were the only Black kids on the team. His older brother had gone to the all-Black Luther Jackson and then transferred to George Mason. But it's just interesting that Wendell ended up in Pennsylvania for a camp.
Yep, it was we played quite a bit during the summer. That one summer, and I have talked to Wendell once or twice over the years. But again, I just remember meeting him initially in State College.
Was he a good player when you played against him? Do
Yes,
you remember him?
very good player.
Yeah. Because he was a football star and track star as well, and as his brother. So when I talked to Coach McKegg, he mentioned that Bill Gibson had a pipeline into Pennsylvania. I guess he was from there, and I think Coach McKegg actually was discovered at a basketball camp, and he probably would have gone to one of those wrestling type schools in Pennsylvania if not for Bill Gibson spotting him. Was that kind of how you got to UVA as well?
Well, long story short, the former coach at Penn State, John Egley, was sort of moved out. That would have been probably my junior year in high school. And I got a phone call from Bill Gibson the spring before my senior year in high school. Coach Gibson went to Penn State and he knew Coach Egley. And Coach Egley had called him and said, there's a kid up here in State College you should look at. So Coach Gibson called and invited me to Camp Gettysburg, of which he ran with another guy from Rider College. So I went to this camp, 1 week camp. Coach Gibson was not there, but Chip Connor, an assistant coach, was helping run the camp. They wanted me as a counselor, and I couldn't figure it out, but they wanted to evaluate me during the counselor games. And the last night there, I lit it up. I just couldn't do anything wrong. And the next day, my father came to pick me up, and Coach Connor came over and said, we'd like you to visit the University of Virginia. I had no idea what he was talking about because I was not recruited. I said, well, yeah, that sounds great. So the following fall in September, I visited the university with my mom and dad. Chamber of Commerce weekend, went to a football game. And on my way out of town, I met with Coach Gibson in his office, and he offered me a scholarship. And I said, sounds great. That was pretty much it. Now there's a backstory because Wake Forest looked at me early. I could tell they weren't interested. They came back in during my high school senior year and offered me a scholarship. And I'd mentioned I was already committed to Virginia. And at the end of the year, there was some kind of a ticket scalping scandal in the ACC tournament with some Virginia players. And there's also they called it a boot to hoot. It was Coach Gibson's nickname was Hoot. And there's some players at Virginia that were trying to get him ousted. I found out through Jack McCloskey, who was the head coach at Wake Forest. And I wasn't sure what to do. Well, Coach Gibson called on a Monday. He came the next weekend. I signed and everything worked out. But again, Julian, I wasn't recruited by anybody. I just got really lucky.
So you could have ended up in one of the Division III schools in Pennsylvania playing basketball as well?
You know, I had a few letters. Who knows what would have happened? Had I not gone to Virginia and Wake Forest wasn't in the picture, I might have just gone to Penn State and tried to walk on or had other opportunities at smaller schools. But again, things work out in strange ways, but usually they work out for the best.
Yeah, well, Penn State would have been very lucky. They would have, and I don't know how they missed it. They probably weren't very good in basketball at those days.
No, you know what? They did not recruit me at all.
Right.
They were good. I knew all their players. I played against and with all their players. I just don't think the coach felt that was good enough. Hey, listen, my dad went there. My brother coached there for 12 years. Penn State's a great place. Thank God they didn't.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and they used to say this about UVA and Terry Holland as well. Sometimes the local players, maybe they were taken for granted a little bit, like Keith Jennings, and there were folks from Central Virginia that people felt over the years UVA didn't go after, and they always went after guys from New Jersey and New York, and it probably was unfair. And sometimes you don't want to over recruit. You don't. I remember I mentioned Mr. Jennings. They had John Crotty, I think, the same class, so obviously you might not want to bring in two point guards at the same time, but that was always a knock against UVA. They kind of took for granted their local players.
You know, coaches are going to miss on players. It's inevitable. You know, the Curry brothers. Now, why didn't they go to Virginia Tech? I don't know, but it happens. There were some other decent players in Central Pennsylvania that did not go to Penn State.
Yeah.
But again, you never know what a coach is looking for.
Yeah. So what was it feeling like when you first saw, I guess it was still Scott Stadium, the UVA football stadium, after growing up at Beaver Stadium with 106,000? And I believe it was that big back then too, right? I think it was.
No, Beaver Stadium when I was growing up was probably about 60,000.
Okay.
It's been expanded many times. And I went to a football game the weekend I visited. And Virginia had a really good year that year. Frank Quayle was a running back, Gene Arnett. But I'm sitting in Scott Stadium watching a game with about 25,000 people, and I'm going, this is not quite like Penn State. But Scott Stadium, as you know, has been expanded. It's a great setting. Thank goodness we have our football stadium on grounds versus somewhere outside. But it was a real contrast at the time.
Yeah. And what was Charlottesville like? So you start your first year, and we'll talk about it. Freshmen were ineligible at the time to play with the upperclassmen. What was UVA like? I think you were probably the year before women were admitted. That your first year, is that right?
We went co-ed my second year. If you know the area, Julian, Hydraulic Road, if you're heading north on 29, was the edge of town. Mm-hmm. Now you can go beyond the airport and still feel like you're in the community. The university was much smaller. I was just really concerned about keeping my grades and playing hoops. When we did go co-ed, it was an amazing phenomenon because all of a sudden there are, I think, 500 women on grounds, and I didn't roll a lot. They call it rolling back then. You went to a girls' school if you were lucky enough to have a date, but the one thing it did is raise the GPA significantly moving forward when the university went co-ed, but it was just much smaller.
Right. And there wasn't that many Black students on grounds yet either, because I think the UVA probably integrated, it was late 60s. And I know Al Drummond came a class after you, I believe, but there wasn't many Black students. My father was from Petersburg. He went to Virginia State, and he was class of 53, much older than you. But there always were some Blacks that were in nursing school or in some program that the state didn't provide anywhere else. So therefore they were allowed to go to University of Virginia. But the people that were in University of Virginia were famous all over the state. They were people that all the Black students at other colleges knew exactly who they were. So when you got there, were there beginning to be Black students generally at UVA?
There were, but very, very few, Julian. Al Drummond, as you mentioned, was the first Black scholarship basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a year younger than I was.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 4 football players in that same class as Al Drummond. Stanley Land, Harrison Davis, John Rainey, and Kent Merritt were the first 4 Black football players. And I see those guys, periodically. And of course, Kent Merritt's from Charlottesville. But I didn't think much about it at the time. But as I got older and hopefully matured at least a little bit, always thought about what a challenge it would have been for Al to play basketball here. Al was a good player. Al passed away several years ago. I ran into him on Route 78 driving into Allentown when I was coaching many, many years ago. I saw him. We were passing his cars with my brother, who's head coach at William & Mary. We pulled off the road. We talked for 15, 20 minutes and kept on going. I did not see him since. There was also a challenge back then, if you stop and think about it. I've had a couple of conversations with women that were in the first class, and that was not an easy transition. There were a lot of older folks that didn't want women at the University of Virginia. I still have not asked the question to the right person. Why did it take so long for Virginia to be co-ed? And the other point about Al Drummond, stop and think, Julian, if a lot of schools more in the South had integrated earlier, and I can't name all the players, but maybe someone like Earl Monroe goes to NC State or Carolina
Instead of Winston-Salem State.
And the whole landscape of basketball would have been much better earlier in terms of the competition. But as you go through it as an undergrad, you just don't think that much about those things.
But Penn State, where you were from, had been integrated and had women long before.
I couldn't tell you when, decades before. Very, very different.
Right. So it was a different experience. So your freshman year, you played freshman. Was that an adjustment? And my guess was, coming from a smaller market, it was probably a good chance for you to really, first of all, get comfortable with the campus and the dynamics, but just really work on your game and bring it to the next level.
I think we called it, of course, here, first year team. And back then, that's the NCAA rule. You could not play as a freshman or first year. They'll never do this. I think they should go back to that. I think what happens, you come in your first year, you get your feet on the ground academically, and you know what? You also check your ego at the door. Because a lot of guys coming in the way they're pampered today, they think they're going to play right away, and they realize there's some pretty good players on this team. I do remember early on, and Julian, we probably played at the Dell, the outdoor basketball courts. This is the first week or two. We couldn't play in University Hall. It was set up for convocation. We couldn't play in Memorial Gym. It was set up for class registration. I remember playing 3-on-3. Myself, Jim Hobgood, Larry Gary, we were all classmates. We played Scott McCandless, Frank DeWitt, and Chip Miller, who were a year older, down at the Dell, 3-on-3 for about an hour. I walked off that court feeling I can play here. That was all I needed, the confidence. But again, we played a first-year schedule. We practiced against the varsity quite a bit, but you really got settled in. And I think that was a really good thing. And it would be a good thing today, but it will never happen.
And you guys traveled on the road and played other ACC first-year teams. Who did you play against? Who else was a freshman your year?
We played Maryland. We played Carolina. And mostly we played local teams, Old Dominion, Randolph-Macon. I can't remember all the teams, but the ACC teams we played were Maryland and North Carolina.
Right. Well, and then your next year, your second year, and you can play with the varsity team, and you have an incredible year. I think you averaged 15 or 16 right out of the block. That must have been really exciting for you. And did it surprise you at all?
Like anything else, maybe it took a little bit of a while to get comfortable. I mean, I started from day one, and we started off pretty well, as I can remember. We had a pretty decent team. We ended up, during the season, we got ranked. We didn't stay in the top 20, but we did get ranked. The one thing, Julian, that I will take to my grave is over my 3 years playing, we proved we could win at Virginia in the ACC. We had some pretty good teams and pretty good players, but that's the one thing that I think we can all feel really good about is we had some pretty competitive teams, and playing in the ACC, it's the best league in the country year in and year out for basketball. Some years maybe not, but back then it was pretty strong, and it was a great experience.
And McCalish, that was a post player. He was probably the top returning player sophomore year.
Scott would have been our center. Scott, Frank DeWitt, Tim Rash, Chip Miller were all a year older. Yeah. My second year, Bill Gary was our starting power forward. I think he's probably one of the most underrated players that's ever played at Virginia. Jim Hobgood, my class, played quite a bit, could really shoot it. We played well together and, had a pretty decent year. And I remember our first home game was against Duke. We played on the road a few times, but there were a couple of people in the community that promoted the game, and we pretty much filled University Hall. Unfortunately, we won the game, and University Hall stayed pretty much full, for the duration.
Was that the game against South Carolina where you hit the game-winning shot? No.
That would have been later on in the year. That was probably in January. That my second year playing varsity.
Right. Okay. So, the first year. Was Dean Smith at UNC? Because I know they had George Carl and I think McAdoo was on that team as well. Is that correct?
George Carl was my class. I was class of 73. Bob McAdoo was at Carolina 1 year. We were the same class, but he was there my third year.
Your third year, okay.
Which is probably the best year we had during my 3 years of playing.
Mm-hmm.
And George Carl and McAdoo, they had Dennis Wysick. They were very, very good.
What kind of player was George Carl? I mean, he's a great personality, excellent coach. You probably had to guard him because you probably played the same position. So what was he like?
I played against George in the ABA as well. George was a great player, very, very tough.
Very tough.
They had another guard, Steve Previs, who was their point guard, would have been my second year. I can't remember who I guarded, probably did guard George. I'm sure he guarded me, but Carolina was always really good. I will say this, Carmichael was my second favorite basketball arena to play in. University Hall, home court was the best, but Carmichael was a great building. We didn't have a lot of success against Carolina, but we beat them there my fourth year.
So did you? It's a great building because you beat them there, or you like the atmosphere there?
The atmosphere was always packed, very loud. I will say that their fans were relatively appreciative of good basketball. Just the atmosphere was kind of a neat old place.
Yeah.
Of course, everything is old today, Julian, but probably more than anything, the atmosphere. And everywhere you played in the ACC, the place was packed. Yeah. I mean, Cole Fieldhouse, Cameron Indoor, you name it, every place was full. But there was something about Carmichael that was pretty electric.
You remember Carmichael had the old paper scoreboard on the court. I mean,
yes,
that was a relic. No one else had that by the early 70s. I mean, I think they had it until like 1980. They had that same scoreboard right there on the floor.
They had the flip numbers.
The flip numbers, yeah.
Yep.
It was crazy. So, well, you ended up losing to UNC in the ACC tournament. And back then, there wasn't that many teams that went to NCAA. It wasn't like top half of the conference would go. So that was it for you. But your second year, your junior year, your second year playing varsity was your best year. You became ACC Player of the Year. You're ACC Athlete of the Year. Early in the year, though, you had an unbelievable upset maybe, but you guys beat Maryland the second game of the year, and you beat Maryland at your place, at our place, and you beat them soundly. That Maryland team had Tom McMillan, Lynn Elmore, and a local guy from here, Jim O'Brien, who's a legend where I'm from. Do you remember much about that game?
I do. It was, the University Hall was packed. They were coming in, I think, ranked in the top 5. And I knew some of their guys from playing against them the years previous. Not just, they had Bob Odell, Jap Trimble, Mo Howard. They were really good. We just played really well. And the crowd Julian, was unbelievable. And that was sort of the beginning of that year where we really got it going. I think we ended up ranked, I think, 6th in the country. I think we got as high as 6th. I remember we were ranked at 6th and we went to play at Penn State and lost the game. I knew it would be a tough game, but again, it was a really good year. But that Maryland game, the crowd was unbelievable.
Did you know the kids on the Penn State team, and did the crowd give you a hard time being a local guy going?
No, I didn't get a hard time. I knew all the players. I played with these guys when I went home for spring break. I will say that their building was full at 6 o'clock for an 8 o'clock game. Wow. So it was a pretty big game, and it was a disappointing game for me. But at the same time, I grew up in that gym. I probably put more hours in rec hall than any human being alive. So it was really a special experience playing back there.
Right. And so, well, that was the year, unfortunately, you got to 6th in the country. And then you played Maryland late in the year, up at their place, low scoring game. They beat you guys. Did you guys hold the ball, control the tempo like you did against South Carolina the year before? Or was it just low scoring because it was a tense matchup?
No, you couldn't hold the ball that year, Julian. Against South Carolina, my second year, they did not have the 5-second count.
Oh, that's right.
They didn't have a hash mark.
Yeah.
Julian, during that game, I dribbled 6 minutes off the clock.
It's incredible.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Now, the Maryland game, I can't remember the whole game. I just don't. Because we also, I believe we played Maryland in the ACC tournament, the semifinals that year.
You did. Mm-hmm.
But they were all good games. We only won one of them. But Cole Fieldhouse, I mean, that place was pretty special too. It was like a big old barn. It was always packed. Yeah. And when you play, there's nothing better than playing in front of a full house.
No, it is.
I don't care whether you're at home or not. There's nothing better. It
is fun. It really gets your adrenaline going. Win or lose. You lose to Maryland in the ACC tournament. So they beat you 2 out of 3. But you go to the NIT, which back then was much bigger than it is now. Mm-hmm. Because there was, fewer teams that went to the NCAA tournament, and you lose to Lafayette and a guy named Tracy Tripucka. Now, was that Kelly Tripucka's? Was that Kelly Tripucka's brother? Because I had never heard of Tracy Tripucka.
Older brother. And Julian, you mentioned earlier back then. I believe the NCAA only took 16 teams, and in the ACC, you had to win the tournament to go to the NCAA. Now, if it were the way it is today, back when I was in school, my third year, we would have gone to the NCAA tournament. The NIT, I'm not degrading it now, but back then it was much bigger because all the games were in Madison Square Garden. Only 16 teams went to the NCAA, so it was a bigger deal. And, I'm not taking anything away from Lafayette. We just laid an egg. We just did not play very well. But they had a couple good players, and, it's in the books. But
Did you know I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Julian.
I was going to say, did you know any of those guys? Because Lafayette is probably, a couple 100 miles from State College.
No, I did not. And back then, if you look, one of their assistant coaches was Gary Williams.
Is that right, Lafayette?
Yes.
Oh, yep. That's cool. Wow.
Yeah.
So they had that going for them. Well, anyway, so you get ACC Player of the Year. That had to be a very special moment. Did you see that coming? Or, obviously you had your best points per game average for your career. So
you don't think about those things, Julian. It's when it happened, I'd be lying if I didn't say I was excited. But you don't prepare to be the ACC Player of the Year, the ACC Athlete of the Year. You do what you do the best you can. I had great teammates, great coaches, and things worked out well.
Yeah. Well, your senior year, your 4th year, as we say in UVA, it was a big change in the air because freshmen were going to be allowed to play, and so Wally Walker, I believe, was going to be able. He was going to be a sophomore. He had set out like all freshmen did his freshman year, and Wally Walker, other than you, was like that first big UVA basketball name. That's the guy. So when I was watching basketball when I was young, Wally Walker was the guy because he led UVA to the upset of the ACC tournament in '76, and also was drafted by the Blazers, I believe. But he had a freshman named Gus Gerard, who became a ABA legend, definitely an NBA legend. I met Gus. I used to play pickup at UVA. He he was a shell of the player he used to be, but you got to know him a little bit. So that must have been a very special year. All of a sudden, you've been a top player for 2 years. Now you have 2 future pro players with you. That must have been a very different team.
It was different. You've got them flip-flop, Julian.
Oh.
Gus was my 4th year. Gus was 2nd year.
Okay, got it.
He could not play his 1st year. I've always said Wally, who was the NCAA brought back freshman eligibility, Wally's 1st year. I always have said that Wally was really Virginia's first time really big recruit, but Gus was a big recruit as well.
Yeah.
And those 2 guys obviously had an incredible amount of talent. My 3rd year, we had played together for a couple of years. And my 4th year, we're bringing in new people. Al Drummond was my backcourt mate. And so there was an adjustment there. We didn't have quite the year that we had hoped. We really, in a way, didn't have a legitimate center. I mean, Scott McCann was a really good player. 6'10", legitimate center, could pass, shoot it pretty well, played pretty good defense. Gus had to play a lot of center that year, which was really out of position for him. But we had a good year, but not a great year. But there was definitely an adjustment for everybody. And I know Wally early on had a bad knee. He finally got healthy into the season and obviously, had a great career, as did Gus, and just wasn't quite what we wanted in terms of success.
Did you know that those guys were going to be special, though? Did you know that Gus and Wally were going to be special players?
Yes. Yeah. I just, when you play with guys early on, you can tell. They had lots of talent. Gus Gerard he was just an amazing offensive player. And Wally was a great shooter. Wally was long, real athletic. Gus was probably one of the most athletic players I've ever played with or against. And we played together in the ABA. They also played against Gus after he was traded.
Right.
So it's pretty amazing.
So Al Drummond, did he get a hard time on the road? Because by then every team had black players, but UVA was the last in the ACC. Was Al Drummond, he was your starting backcourt mate, when you go on the road, people give him a hard time, or by then it was kind of accepted and it was more business as usual?
Never heard or experienced anything. And if Al did, he never said anything. But no, and I will say this, I don't know if there's Maryland fans out there, but Maryland they were the nastiest fans in the league, but never heard anything, racist against Al, any comments like that, anywhere we played.
Yeah. By the way, we'll go back to your last year. Do you have what's your memories of Jim O'Brien? Because being based in Northern Virginia, he was a very legendary figure here, just because he was very unique. He was kind of I don't want to say strange looking guy, but he wasn't your normal looking basketball guy. And he got a hard time from the fans up here in high school, but he didn't care. He was like one of these guys that would just go out there and play. He didn't care how much you jeered him. As a matter of fact, he played better if the crowd was yelling at him. Do you have any recollection of Jim O'Brien? Well,
Jim and I were classmates. So I played against him for 4 years, knew him a little bit. I think I've talked to him once or twice since. He was just a great player. I do remember, and I don't think I'll be able to name all 4 players, but Lefty Driesell took out an ad in the Washington Post stating he wanted James Brown, Jim O'Brien, another kid who I think might have gone to Harvard. I can't remember the other 2, but Jimmy was a great player, great shooter. And obviously he was surrounded by some really good players.
Yeah. James Brown is the guy who went to Harvard and he's the NFL commentator. Is that
correct?
Yeah, cool. So to get back to your senior year, it didn't really work out. But we didn't really talk much about Coach Gibson. Now, Coach Gibson, UVA had never been a great sports school, at least for football and basketball. And I guess football was even probably worse than basketball. But Gibson began to turn things around, even though he never really got there. What kind of coach was he? What were kind of his strengths that you remember of him, and anything that you used yourself when you became a coach?
The one thing is 50 some years ago, I think Coach Gibson we did things based on the talent we had. And my 3rd year, we did a lot of pressure. We pressed quite a bit. I would say we went up and down a lot more than we did my 2nd year or my 4th year. We mixed it up on defense, played some zone, played some man-to-man. I think especially certain games, we tried to shorten the game to give us a better chance to win, like South Carolina, my second year. We played NC State my fourth year. They had David Thompson, Tom Burleson, Monte, Towe. They were loaded. And we really tried to keep the game a little bit shorter. We gave them 3 really good games. Didn't get them one of the 3, but they were all close games. And again, Wally and Gus, we had some more talent maybe than we had the previous years. But coach sort of adjusted things based on the talent we had.
So what was the key to Terry Holland taking the team to the next level? I know you didn't play for Coach Holland, but I'm sure you knew him really well. He came in and, he had some great success with recruiting as well. Getting Ralph Sampson was probably one of the biggest moments in the history of the school, definitely the basketball program. What was Terry Holland like? And why was he able to have so much success?
Well, I mean, I was a graduate assistant 1 year under Terry. And then, of course, Terry was my boss. He was AD here for several years. And
that's right. Yeah.
I really came over to athletic development thanks to Terry when he was hired as AD. I think you look back at Terry, and when I was coaching at William & Mary, we played Virginia, and I followed Virginia. And quite a bit like Coach Bennett. I think the foundation was defense, man-to-man, really playing solid defense, and offensively getting the best shots you could get. And I think those were the staples of the Coach Holland years. Of course, you look at recruiting, obviously Ralph, but boy, he recruited a lot of other great players. You got guys like Brian Stiff and Wally played for Coach Gibson and for Terry, and Mark Ivoroni and Billy Langlow. And I could go on, but there were some pretty doggone good players. You think of Ralph's years. I mean, you had Ralph, you had Jeff Lamb. You also had Lee Raker. You had Robinson, who was a tough kid, rebounded. And Jeff Jones. Jeff Jones is an incredibly underrated player. On any other team, Jeff would have been probably a greater scorer, but he just facilitated everything. And but Terry had good players, but it started with defense and rebounding. And that's, you played. That's really important.
Yeah, and also Othell and Olden Paul and these guys that just came in and out of nowhere, not even heavily recruited, and they did so well. Well, football was on a kind of the same track as basketball, but a couple of years behind. Sonny Randall never had much success at UVA. I went to his Sonny Randall football camp down at Fort Union when I was a kid, and I actually met the old Jets wide receiver. But George Welsh turned the football team around in an unbelievable fashion. He did a great job at Navy, came to UVA, and I got to experience those great years where he clearly put UVA on the map. What did you think about George Welsh, and did you get to know George Welsh at all?
I did, Julian. When I came back here, he was still coaching, but growing up in State College, when George was an assistant under Joe Paterno at Penn State,
I didn't know that.
He and his family lived right around the corner from where I grew up, catty corner from my grandmother. I didn't know him at the time, but I knew who he was. Mm-hmm. Number one, Coach Welsh was a great coach. But what he did, if you remember early on, is he was able to get kids in Virginia to come to Virginia versus going somewhere else, whether Virginia Tech or Penn State or North Carolina, the Terry Kirby's, the Chris Slades. Mm-hmm. And the guy was a great coach. And what he did here, you think back, was pretty remarkable. He was consistently good for his entire coaching career here, and performed pretty much a miracle.
Yeah, I don't think people realize the kind of the joke UVA football was at one point. I remember when we went to my first game in '84, we played Clemson the first game, Refrigerator Perry. I think Sterling Sharp State. We lost 55-0. And I mean, they were laughing at us, the Clemson fans. And, but he was building and building. And, it's just the fact that UVA has these great sports programs. I don't think the kids understand what it means. We had a great experience at UVA without that, but I think it's such a key in today's environment. I'm sure it makes your fundraising that much easier. But anyway, to go back to your basketball again. So your fourth year, it's over, and you get drafted by the Portland Trail Blazers. Now, people are going to forget in NBA in 1970, 71, I think there may have been 12 teams max, or 13, 14 teams max. The NBA was very small. And then the ABA came around, and all of a sudden there were more opportunities for players. So you got drafted by Portland, but you ended up going to the ABA. So what was that? What was that process?
It was very interesting. I was drafted at the end of my second year here at the University of Virginia in the ABA.
Oh,
I think more than anything, they were testing the waters. But I got to tell you, as a second year student athlete, that was pretty cool.
yeah.
I did have a chance. I could have jumped after my third year into the ABA. The ABA worked in different ways. They were more regional. If you grew up in or played in a certain area, we're probably going to sign with a team that was close to where you went to school.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wanted to graduate. I also wanted to play on the Olympic team. I never had any thoughts of coming out early. But after my fourth year, I knew it was going to be Virginia ABA, and I was drafted by Portland, and I had the identical contracts, and I chose the ABA. In hindsight's 2020,
mm-hmm.
but the biggest reason I chose the ABA, there were really two. One, the Virginia Squires were located in Virginia, and I played here in Charlottesville, and Julius Erving and George Gervin were on the Virginia Squires. And I'm thinking, this is a pretty good situation. Julius was sold right before my rookie camp.
Mm.
George Gervin and Swen Nader, who I signed with the same day, were sold into my rookie season. And the owner was just bailing out. He wanted to make some money with his assets, and he sold the team.
Mm.
I don't blame him for doing that. The fans were upset. But, I played 3 years, and then leagues merged, and that was history. And if I had it to do all over again, this is terrible to say, but I probably would have signed with Portland. I was a point guard, but I was taller. The point guards in the ABA were small and quick, and I was never small or quick. So I think position-wise, it might have been a better chance. But hey, had a good experience, and life goes on.
What was the environment like? So I think Virginia Squires were in Tidewater area. Were they in the Hampton Coliseum? So were they well supported? What was the environment like there?
Well, we were regional. We played games in Scope and Norfolk and Hampton Coliseum. Almost a 50-50 split. We had really good crowds. We'd have had better crowds if they would pick one place to play.
Right.
We also played a couple games in Richmond and one game in Roanoke. The only thing I'll say about the ABA, if people do their homework, Julian, if you look at the all NBA teams after the merger, there's as many former ABA players as NBA players. The ABA was just in smaller markets. You had the New York Nets were great. Indiana Pacers were great. Denver Nuggets, they had David Thompson. They were really good. And San Antonio always had a really good franchise. Those are the teams that went into the NBA.
Right.
But the ABA, other teams sort of came and went. I mean, at the very end of the league, St. Louis and Virginia were the only two teams left. And then there was a dispersal draft, and they took the 4 teams into the NBA, and that was it.
Mm. Wait, well, you got to know, did you play with Mike D'Antoni and Moses Malone? Did you play with those guys as well? So what were those guys like? I mean, D'Antoni is just an amazing coach. He's from Mullins, West Virginia, which I played against Mullins in high school. Most amazing little basketball factory you'll ever see. But what were those guys like?
I was traded to St. Louis my third year playing. Mm-hmm. And on that roster through the year, not all at one time, we had Moses came in later on when Utah folded. Gus Gerard was there till he got traded. Marvin Barnes, who was one of the greatest players I've ever laid eyes on. Maurice Lucas, Caldwell Jones, Don Chaney, Ron Boone.
Unbelievable.
It was the talent was there. Moses was great. I stayed semi in touch with Moses right up until he passed away. Mike D'Antoni, I reconnected with when he was coaching with the Knicks, and I've seen him several times, and I talk to him every once in a while. Great guy, one of the really good people in the world. Not just a great coach, but a great human being. Great family. Mike was a hell of a player, but Moses,
yeah.
I mean, everybody knows what he did. And I mentioned earlier, Marvin Barnes was so good when he wanted to play. That was a great experience.
So Marvin Bad News Barnes, and he was given to me, it's the greatest nickname in sports. He was given the nickname Bad News by his high school teammates. So it tells you a lot about Marvin Barnes. He went to Providence and he played with Ernie DiGregorio, and I guess they got to the Final Four, and they almost pulled off an upset in the Final Four as well. But he went to St. Louis, and he was a character. I mean, if anyone has seen the ESPN special in the St. Louis Spirit, will never forget Marvin Barnes. What was he like on a daily basis? Was the ESPN special more of a caricature of him, or was it really that crazy with him?
Marvin, which is a really good guy, happy-go-lucky, incredibly talented. I mean, I saw him when we played at home in St. Louis. We played in the Checker Dome, which sat, I don't know, 15 to 20,000 people. When we played the New York Nets or the good teams, the place would be packed. Of course, people were coming to see Julius. Marvin would go for 45 or 50 points and 25 or 30 rebounds.
Mm-hmm.
He was so talented. I mean, there were just certain times where he wasn't as focused as he needed to be. But boy, when he wanted to play, there was nobody like him. 6'9", could run, could shoot, could rebound, could play D. He had his challenges over the course of his lifetime, but boy, was he a great player and just a really, really good guy.
Did the culture of pro sports at the time bother you? I know there was a lot of drug use in pro sports. It was kind of a fast time, and you were from more conservative, at least morals areas like State College in Charlottesville. You weren't a big city guy. Did the morals of pro sports kind of bother you? I know you retired after 3 years. Were you ready for something new, or?
No, I didn't retire. I was pushed. That was history.
Yeah.
I thought I'd play for 10 years, but there was a lot of drugs. I just never got involved. Did it bother me? Not really. I saw it, stayed away from it. But I'm sure it's very different today. I mean, even back then, the day-to-day travel was pretty brutal, especially in the ABA. We didn't have direct flights from one city to the next. You had to go somewhere to get somewhere else. And now all these guys, they're in charter planes and they have direct flights. But that part of it, it was there, but it really didn't bother me. It was different. You know, you expect a certain thing when you're playing professionally, and it was a bit of an eye opener, but again, a good experience.
So when you look back, I mean, the ABA pro basketball changed a lot between 1970 and 1979 because it went from being almost a 100% African American league from having one or two black players on each team. So the style of play changed in the league. But nowadays, basketball is completely different than it was back then. I mean, with the three-point stripe, there's so much more space on the field. I watched some videos of you playing yesterday in preparation. And one thing that struck me was, there wasn't any space anywhere on the court. I mean, because there was no three-point, everyone kind of sagged in the lane, and the game was much different. Nowadays, obviously, you were a great shooter. You would have been able to take advantage of the three-point stripe. But do you ever think about how you would have played with all that space out there? You would have been able to slash to the hole. Would you have enjoyed the opportunity to play today's type of basketball, or did you like it better the way it was when you played?
Well, I'll never know because I'll never play the way they play today. The one thing that I think is huge, Julian, is, as I said before, kids get coached now in college pretty much year-round. They're in the weight room. Their diet. I've always thought if I had what our kids have today back 50 years ago, how much better could we have gotten? And I even think about individually. I've worked really hard by myself, but a lot of times, what are you working on? When you have somebody teaching you, I was a point guard. I would have been a better ball handler. I would have been a better shooter. I wasn't a great shooter. I was a scorer. I would have been a better shooter. You think about the ABA, that's where the three-point line originated. And look what that has done to the game of basketball from back then till now. I think that's the biggest change. But again, we'll never know. Back then, even in the ABA, there are a lot of set plays. Today, there may be some set plays, but it's more fluid motion, screening and rolling, spacing. Just penetrate, beat your guy, hit the open guy, he shoots a three. The defense is better than what people think it is. The offense is just so good because guys are so talented, but the defense is very sophisticated. But the game is just very different because guys are just more athletic.
Yeah. So anyway, so you retire from basketball and you go to UVA and you get into coaching like your brother. You follow him to William and Mary. But eventually you find your niche in fundraising at the University of Virginia. You've had this great career doing that. I mean, and so I guess you've been doing that for almost 30 years.
Correct.
So have you enjoyed doing the fundraising, and what are some of the things you've been involved in at UVA?
I love coaching. I don't love losing, but I enjoyed coaching. I enjoyed everything you do, everything I've done since I got out of school. It's all about people. You coach kids. You hopefully have an impact on their lives away from basketball. Coaching was great. I love my job. There's a lot of me that wishes I've been doing this 10 years before I started, but it's about, I love the University of Virginia. I love our athletic programs. I've got great relationships with people all over the country, people who care about us, who care about the university, who support athletics. I want our kids, our players, our student athletes to have the best experience they can. We want to win, but we're going to do it the right way here. We're not going to compromise the academic integrity, but I got the greatest job in the world.
Oh, they're lucky to have you. Well, last question, and I really appreciate all your time. Tony Bennett has finally gotten UVA over the hump, and we've had great coaches through the years after Holland stepped down. Jeff Jones had a good run, Pete Gillen, on and on and on. But for some reason, Tony Bennett finally had the right formula. We had some ups and downs in terms of upsets, but we win a national championship, which is almost like the Red Sox fans or the Cubs fans, in that we finally caught the car. It's weird to actually have been champions. But anyway, that must have been a great experience for you, because you really helped build that house and you helped put UVA on a path to excellence. So what do you think about Tony Bennett? Obviously, I know he's incredible, and what have you thought about the way he's built the program and the success they've had today?
Julian, when Tony and his wife Laurel and kids first moved to Charlottesville, we were neighbors. They lived a couple doors up, so got to know his whole family, his kids, his mom and dad. And I've said this a million times. Obviously he's a great coach. I think he's the best coach on the planet. He's got great people around him. He and his coaches are great teachers. Our kids get better. That's really important. They get better as players. But all that said, he's a better human being. He just does things that people would be amazed, although today they're not amazed anymore. He's got a way about him. He's as competitive as the day is long, but he's not the kind of coach that has to holler and scream. He gets his point across. He's very grounded. He doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. But what he's done here is more than remarkable. And the one thing that's really interesting is he's got so many fans around the country, fans of other programs. But when we're playing somebody who's maybe we're playing North Carolina, well, people see how he acts, people see how our kids are. They become fans of Tony Bennett, not when we're playing their team, but we're playing somebody else. He's amazing at what he does and how he runs his program.
Yeah, I guess he's a values first coach. And I guess, I mean, that just always works. And not only to win basketball games, but to raise young athletes.
He's a character guy. Same thing as values. He's got his pillars and he preaches them and he stands by them. And it's pretty doggone amazing. Not only has he established a great program, but look at all the guys we have playing in the NBA around the country, around the world, because he develops these kids. And we've gotten really, really good players, and we've gotten good players that he's turned into great players, having been a great teacher and coach.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, look, Coach, this has been an honor to me. I mean, we worshipped you, and it was almost, you had this legend about you, and without
You're showing your age.
What's that?
You're showing your age.
Exactly. And I don't mean to show yours, but you've meant a lot to all basketball fans in the area. When Coach McKegg said that I might be able to talk to you, I'm like, wow, that would be such an honor. So I really appreciate you doing this. I wish you great success. My son is starting UVA in the fall. So maybe at some point, me, you, and Coach McKagan and my son can meet in person and have a coffee or whatever. It would be great to meet you in person.
The honor's mine. Tell me your son's name.
His name is Chandler Brown.
You make sure that you connect him with me when he comes down. I'll make sure I keep an eye on him.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, it's a great family down there, and I really appreciate you that offer. We will definitely take you up on it.
And I'll look forward to it. The only thing I can't help him with is his schoolwork, because he's smarter than I am, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's funny. I can't even help my kids. After like 7th and 8th grade, I couldn't even help them anymore. And I was a good student, but they teach everything so differently than when we were in school.
Yes.
So you're on your own in terms of academics.
You come see us.
Yeah, we sure will. Again, Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for having me, and Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you as well. Thanks again,
Thank
Coach.
you.
All right, bye-bye. Have a good one.